Wafube, peace and blessings. This is Misael Bay, aka Warlock Asylum, coming at you once again with another lesson from the Simon Necronomicon. And hold on, get some water in. And before we begin, I want to make a couple announcements about the series, in that we'll be going through all 12 sections of the body of the text, beginning from the testimony of the Mad Arab, part 1, and ending at the testimony of the Mad Arab, part 2, and everything in between. And from there, I will continue on in discussing books that I've published that may deal with other spiritual sciences. And there will also be some coursework laid out for the Simon Tone for those wishing to learn about the system and to continue to pursue it as their spiritual path. So we want to begin this discussion with the testimony of the Mad Arab. What's interesting is I just was talking to a Arabian scholar, a Sufi, and he's also spent a lot of time with the Necronomicon by Simon and as a gatewalker. We basically was just conferring over the untimely death of Ashnuk that either of us didn't know because we had all fell out of contact, and it was recently announced on the news page. So unfortunate. You know, he was a really good guy, and he had spearheaded a lot. Actually, Ashnuk was probably the second person I've known personally to have walked the gates. You know, before, let me just say this before we start getting into this text. I don't think there were too many people who walked the gates before the disciples of Enki or the Order of Necronomicon was discovered. And so Ashnuk was one of 3 people to find the Order of the Necronomicon. And this went on somewhere in the early 2000 years. I would say like 2005, maybe even a little bit earlier than that. But they were working with the tone for quite some time. And out of that came the majority of people that you see gatewalking today. You know, because no one really knew how to uncover that book. It was a very interesting time. And even for myself, I had, really, I knew what the 50 names were because the Necronomicon spell book is easy to read. But as far as gatewalking was concerned, going through the path of initiation, that was completely oblivious to most occult schools at that time. All of them, actually. There was a couple of documents that was written by Albert Thomas. He did the key to the Necronomicon. And basically, that was it. You know, there wasn't really too much available, and there was absolutely no information about gatewalking at all, you know. So the system, the Necronomicon by Simon, is a book that is a deep alchemist book. And it does take a lot to get to understand how the rites is done, how, how the information works, really. I won't really be going into the rituals per se. I may touch on a few things for the sake of clarity and some aspects of the text. I leave those things to people who are teaching the system and who are mentoring others. You know, that's their thing. I'm just here to share some information. And if someone wants to learn, that's interesting. But if they're not my school of students, then I'm only going to divulge so much, and that's how that works, you know what I'm saying? Because, you really should know someone that you're sharing this information with. The bottom line. I know in today's world, I didn't really grow up around a world in occultism where, strangers taught people the deeper things of the universe. I just didn't grow up in that world. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. People have different ways of getting to know each other and stuff, but there's only so much that I'll go into unless someone is part of that student body. And, even within that context, that doesn't make a person obligated to share their knowledge in any situation, because some knowledge is not shared through a teaching process. That's the first thing I had squared this away when I started getting on the esoteric path. That's one thing, and that's what the Mad Arab talks about in his first testimony. So let me go on and share my screen so we can get right into this. And this is the testimony of the Mad Arab. And he has a lot to say. The testimony of the Mad Arab part 1 is probably the biggest teaching tool that a student of the Necronomicon path can endear, because in this body of work, he tells you how the rites are performed. You see what I'm saying? And, when you come across certain things that he was able to enact, it starts making sense what he was going through. But there are a lot of things in the book that were similar to some of the things that we talked about in previous podcasts. But in the beginning, he starts off by saying, "This is a testimony for all I've seen, that have learned in those years that I have possessed the 3 seals of Masshu. I have seen 1,001 moons, and surely this is enough for the span of a man's life, though it is said that the prophets live much longer." Okay, so basically the whole knowledge of what the Mad Arab had witnessed and seen is imbued in the 3 seals of Masshu. Okay, and that's a really tremendous effort. I did like a lot of writing on the blog page about the 3 seals of Masshu. I will post those links in the description area of this video, so that everyone could really see what's happening with that. I'm going to continue on. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, because there's a couple of things that, before I do, I want to try to find a couple of key words. Yeah, I want to find a couple of key words, which I'm going to reflect now. I'll go back here and share my screen, and I'm going to reflect on a couple of key thoughts mentioned by the Mad Arab. Okay, let me see where we're at with this. Here we go. Okay. This is one section that I want to talk about. It says, henceforth, from that fateful night, when he explains how he received the 3 sigils of Masshu, I wandered about the countryside in search of the key to the secret knowledge that had been given me. And it was a painful and lonely journey, during which time I took no wife, called no house or village my home, and dwelt in various countries, often in caves and deserts, learning several tongues as a traveler might learn them, to bargain with the tradespeople and learn their news and customs. But my bargaining was with the powers that reside in each of these countries. Okay, so now this talks about, when he says the bargaining was with the powers that reside with each of these countries, that validates what we talked about in the previous video. I think is part 8, lesson 8, that if you're going to work in this hemisphere, you have to give honors to the spirits that live in this hemisphere. Those spirits could develop from the African diaspora. They could have been part of the Native American pantheon, but you have to give respect to the spirits that govern the land that you were born in, that govern the land that you live in. For most Americans, a lot of Americans, America is the land that they were born in. So if they pursue a path of magic, they have to give honors to those spirits as homeland deities, not because of some colonial racial classification. This is further enhanced, and I'm going to see if I could find it. Let me just take a little bit of an oblique look in the book of Daniel, actually. Let me see if I can find this right quick. I don't like to come too rehearsed to these videos because I want to be able to talk to you in a way that is sincere. And I think it's Daniel chapter 12. Let me see. I don't want to. Yes, I believe it's Daniel chapter 12. And let me see. Let me see. Okay, let me just roll back a little bit. But that's something that we all want to keep in mind when we are, doing our work. So sometimes it's good to kind of incorporate, what some of the energies of our native land and the land that we reside in into our work of the Necronomicon path. Okay, I see. Let me see. Okay, so it's Daniel chapter 10, actually. And I think I just wanted to touch on that right quick. And then we'll move on to, let me see. Okay. Yes, it is Daniel chapter 10. And, like somebody commented, this is not a Bible lesson, but actually it supports the idea of watchers that have to be regarded in every land. Okay, because they're the governors of that land. It's like if you visit a foreign country, for example, right? And, or you live in a foreign country or you live in a country abroad, you can't ask a governor from your land to rectify a situation in the country that you're residing in. You have to work through that governmental system. It could be some correspondence or whatever, but that's just an example to illustrate the importance of saluting the homeland deities in the land that you in wherever that you were living in. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. And we're going to get into this section of Daniel. It's a Google search through the book of Daniel, chapter 10. And let me just illustrate this. Okay, in those days, I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 full weeks. This is Daniel chapter 10, verses 2. He talks about he ate no bread, whatever. Then I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins was girded with the fire of Uphaz. His body was like a beryl, in his face as the appearance of lightning. So basically, he came across an angel. Now, if we go down a little bit further, in verses 9, he says, "Yet I heard the voice of his words, and when I heard the voice of his words, then I was in deep sleep on my face, Okay, that's not the section. But basically, Daniel, to give you an overview, was praying for 21 days. And when the angel came to him, this is what he says in verses 12. He says, "Then said he unto me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and did chasten thyself before thy God, the words were heard, and I am come for thy words. But the prince of Persia withstood me 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. Okay, so let me stop sharing this. So basically, what he's saying is that he was praying for 21 days, and that an angel came to see him, but that angel was blocked by the prince of Persia. And a lot of times, people will interpret that as some sort of demon or something, but no, he was doing what he's supposed to do. He was supposed to block any, spiritual interference from some other kingdom that was not his own. That's what this prince of Persia, or this celestial or otherworldly entity, was doing, and it prevented the angel, quote unquote, the Most High, from seeing Daniel. So when we go back into the Mad Arab words, that what he's talking about, and I'm going to share my screen once again, in the testimony of the Mad Arab, where he says, but my bargaining was with the powers that reside in each of the countries. And soon I came to understand many things which I had no knowledge except perhaps in dreams. So it was beneficial for him to bargain with those powers of that land, because that's how he came to understand the knowledge. They, the knowledge of like government is known in different governments, how it works. So they were able to assist him because that led to a smooth flow. And this is one of the reasons why when you hear the Mad Arab talking about the god Naga, this is something that happened. Another interesting thing that should be taken into consideration is what came first. In the Mad Arab experience, did walking the gates come first, or did the sigil of Ganzir come first? That's something to think about. And that's something I'm not going to really get into, but we do see in this section where he receives the 3 sigils. What are these 3 sigils called? Okay, and he gets into that where he talks about, of the 3 carved signs, the first is the sign of our race, and he individually describes them, which are the Ara, the Aga, and the Bandar symbol. This is actually the gate to the outside. These 3 symbols are the gate to the outside. And this is the anvil that I held in my hand, holds this very day around my work, and I write these words. And this is actually the sigil of Ganzir. So this work is probably lingering on, let me just pull this back up again. I don't know why this went off. Sorry. This work is probably lingering on let me pull my screen back up, a shadowy alchemical art, right? So this is what we can kind of understand from this, and through the Mad Arab's testimony, we can get a full insight on the text itself. He goes down further to say that he learned of various classes of demons, evil gods that exist in the old legends of the ancient ones. He's learned of good deities. And here's another thing, that there is a secret that we learn in the testimony of the Mad Arab. And that is the god and goddess that are petitioned in ritual. And let me see if I could find it here. This is not like having a book, but this is what it says right here. And people have probably read this in the testimony of the Mad Arab and may have not known what it means, where it says, I have summoned the ghosts of my ancestors to real and visible appearance on the tops of temples built to reach the stars, and built to reach the nethermost cavity of Hades. I have wrestled with the black magician, Azak Thor, in vain, and fled to the earth by calling upon Inanna and her brother Marduk, Lord of the double-headed axe. So there you have it, Inanna and her brother Marduk. Those are the god and goddesses. That's the god and goddess petition in the Simon Necronomicon. So there's quite a bit of meat here. And another thing that we do want to state is that the actual text of the Simon Tome is divided into 12 parts. And like the Tanakh of the Jewish religion, each month a certain part of the text should be read. And we're going to be discussing this next week when we talk about the next section in the Simon Necronomicon, which, let me see, I have to pull that up. And one of the things we're going to be talking about is, oh yes, of the zoni and the attributes. And each of these sections are to be read with the beginning of the Necronomicon New Year, which will be on October 31st. So of this year, so I'm going to be talking about the Necronomicon calendar, upcoming New Year, and also the second section of the Simon Necronomicon of the zoni and their attributes. And one of the things I did, now I kind of remember my train of thought that almost slipped from me, is that when I was talking to the Sufi, he had like a lot of grimoires in Arabic that he was translating. And he said that the Testimony of the Mad Arab reads exactly like an Arabian grimoire, which is very interesting considering the time that it was published and it was written. So this concludes our overview of the Testimony of the Mad Arab Part 1. This is me, Sile Bay, aka Warlock Asylum, wishing you all the best. Have a great evening.